This is Get Real with Bob and Stacy, the show that helps you learn about the mortgage and real estate markets. Get the inside scoop from their expert list of guests and have some fun along the way. Now, here's Bob Gallagher and Stacy Alcorn.
Welcome back. You're listening to Get Real with Bob and Stacy. You're joining us for our Leaders and Legends segment. Our first guest today is Dr. Katherine Loflin, consultant in the field of quality of places. Welcome to the show, Katherine.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
So I want to give everybody some background on Dr. Katherine Loflin. She has a very unique job, and I look forward to digging in more. Right before the show, I said this is one of the most unique people that we've had on the show in a long time. Dr. Katherine Loflin is a recognized global leader in placemaking, quality of life places, and why they matter. She has held leadership and advisory roles in some of the most groundbreaking and innovative placemaking projects, including Night Soul of the Community, Our Miami, Calgary's Inspiring Strong Neighborhoods, and the Place Capital Inventory in Australia. In 2014, she was awarded the International Place Marketing Award, named the Guest of Honor, and taught the Masterclass at Place Marketing Forum in France. Through this portfolio of work, she has earned the moniker of City Doctor and is in-demand, award-winning placemaking consultant advising cities around the world. Her first, very anticipated book, titled Place Match, The City Doctor's Guide to Finding Where You Belong, was released in December 2015 and is available on Amazon. She's been featured all over the place, including the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, NPR, ESPN, Crane's Detroit Business, Realtor.com, CBS News, and the list goes on. So, my first question before we dig into some of the other stuff is what does a placemaker do?
Well, basically, my job is to go into places and help them to be optimized to being the best place that they can be. And that means creating the quality of life there that not only will residents respond to and visitors alike, but also will help to grow the economy of those places. So I really focus on places as destinations where we find one of our most important attachment points in life, which is where we live.
Okay. So who would hire you? Like a town or a developer?
Well, yes, and it's interesting to understand that really how this field of practice really got shot into the stratosphere in the last 5 to 10 years, I would say, is a result of some research that I was a part of that you mentioned, the Soul of the Community Project, which really looked at what makes people love where they live and why does it matter? I mean, is that a big deal or not? And we had some pretty groundbreaking findings with that research that really changed the face of how communities and cities understood themselves. And so as a result, yes, so I can be contracted to come in by the city, by the mayor, sometimes by the private sector, because businesses and other small and large businesses in the community are realizing that we're dealing with the first generation of talent who will choose a place over a job. And when you have that economic shift in the way your young economic engines work, then obviously you have to start paying attention to how good of a sell is our place. So the private sector and the business community comes to me quite often as well. I also work increasingly with the realtor and the real estate sector, both in helping them make funding decisions on the ground through their charitable work. In other words, how can we help this place be better? But also in helping real estate agents themselves become better at selling places above and beyond selling houses, because that's what the market wants these days.
Wow, that's powerful. So I know I see it on Facebook. I share them as well. We see the Boston Business Journal in our market, or Banker and Tradesman, all the newspapers, Boston Magazine. They all have their top places to live lists. Is that stuff real?
Yeah. Well, you know, as a researcher, so I feel very comfortable saying this, is that you really have to look at the fine print, because you can find two lists that say that they're measuring the same thing, but when you look at what they actually use to come up with these lists, it may or may not pass what I call the smell test. I'm not really sure that's a very good measure for what it is you think you're measuring. And that's only one side of the equation, because when I go into cities around the world, I say that quality of life is about two very important things. The laundry list of things that a place offers, and that's what we learn from these top 10 lists, that yes, these are the cities that look good on paper. But the second part of quality of life is you being in that space and how do you feel in it? Because the reality is many of us could go into a city that ranks number one on that list and be perfectly miserable.
Right.
Why could that be if they're number one? Because it doesn't feel like quality of life to you. And so we can't skip that step. So I have kind of a approach avoidance thing with these lists. I think they're one data point. I think they're worth considering, but they're not more important than your experience in that place, which will ultimately decide if it's the place for you.
Wow, great stuff.
Yeah.
So as far as your research has shown, are there a few things that do make a great place?
Yeah, so this is what was fascinating, I think, about the Soul Project. We were in the field between 2008 and 2010, and as you guys probably clearly remember, in our country, we were in economic freefall. There was a lot going on in cities, and so we started this project at a time of real uncertainty in our communities. And so, And so what we went through is we looked at 26 cities over 3 years. We talked to 37,000 people. And what we found was remarkably similar. And that is the things that most matter for people loving where they live are three things. They are the availability of social offerings that people enjoy. They are the aesthetics of a place, and they are how well the community does in being welcoming to lots of different kinds of people. And when you have those three soft sides of place ready to go, and a person who's ready to fall in love with you, they fall in love. And of course, the thing is that social offerings in Miami looks different than social offerings in Wichita. So that's where our individual differences get to come into play really hard. You have to know, well, do I want Miami social offerings or do I want Wichita social offerings? You know, do I want rural aesthetics or do I want big city aesthetics? But no matter what your interpretation is of those things, it is those things that pull your heartstrings to a city and really make you want to be there. And so that was the same in every city we studied, and we studied a lot of places, from Detroit to Macon, Georgia, to St. Paul to Charlotte, North Carolina. They couldn't have been more different, and we found those same three things mattered the most. And cities that had people who loved those three aspects of the place did better economically. They grew faster. They had more people starting businesses there. They had more people emotionally and financially invested in those places. And so this is why the business community and the academic community and the real estate community really came hard knocking on my door, because they were like, how can we make this as one of our new approaches to the practice in this new world where people are prioritizing place? And now we know the key to making places great. So let's get started. And that's pretty much what I've been doing ever since.
Wow. So do you have any tips you can share now for realtors on something that they could do differently starting today, knowing how important it is to sell the place before they actually sell the physical place?
I think, when I talk to real estate groups, one of the first things I always say is be aware of this new reality. I have a whole spiel that I do on the new power of place. And it talks about not only this new talent shift where they choose places over jobs, but also how connection to place matters in your productivity at work and lots of other things. And so I always say, starting out, is be aware of this new environment. That doesn't mean that you throw out your old playbook, but your old playbook needs to be updated to becoming more efficient and effective at being able to sell place. You are going to have clients, and I've seen this happen, who say, I want to sit somewhere in this neighborhood during rush hour, quote unquote, in the morning, when people are all leaving to work. I want to see what that experience is like in this place. I want to see what it's like when kids are offloaded off the bus. I want to see the experience of living here. And I think the more that real estate agents can say, I'm prepared to let you, give you that experience,
right,
the better off they will be. We have to go beyond the number of bathrooms and the hardwood floors to outside of the house and being able to present place to people in a way that they want to hear about it these days. And that will make you more marketable as a real estate agent, and more likely that someone will say, hey, you should really use him or her because she gave us insight or he gave us insight to the experience of living there, which is what we really needed to know.
So interesting. I bought my house 6 years ago, and I remember sleeping there the first night, and I heard this unbelievable trembling sound, which was a train going through. I'm like, holy cow, there's a train that is a mile away.
I didn't know you were that close to the train.
I'm very close. Now I don't notice it, but probably I wish I had known that before I purchased it. Let's move to your book, Place Match, The City Doctor's Guide to Finding Where You Belong. People are calling it, they compare it to a dating and marriage guide to finding your right place. Tell us more about the book.
Yeah. Well, I was inspired really to write this book because I work in a very clinical, scientific field, believe it or not, where we study how humans thrive in different environments. And when I do talks, I'm a TED talker. I've done TED Talks. I do hundreds of talks every year. I think my claim to fame is that I take all of this kind of complicated stuff and I make it relatable and I make it usable. And so when my clients and other folks who follow me said, why don't you have a book? Why don't you have a book? And I said, I'm still traumatized from writing my dissertation. I don't want to write a book or ever again. They said, well, you really should. And so I was compelled to write a book I thought that was mainstream. And I wanted to find a way to make some of these kind of weird ideas very understandable. So what I did is I compared finding the right place to live to finding the right partner to share your life. Because before I started in this, I was going to be a marriage and family therapist. I'm trained in that. So I thought, well, it is kind of like that. And in my personal life, I was going through a divorce, and I was going through a divorce with my place. And so I was like, there's a reason why this is all happening to me at the same time. So Place Match is sort of a play on Match.com or some of the other dating sites that we see so much of these days. And what it does is it really walks through the steps of finding the place that you belong. So I have a chapter on dating your place. How do you get to know a place? How do you get to know your city with the flu, so to speak? Just like you shouldn't marry somebody without seeing them with the flu. You shouldn't commit to a place until you really know the good, the bad, and the ugly about living in that place. And then how do you know when you're ready to commit? How do you know that this is the place for you? And then once you make that commitment, there's a whole chapter on marrying the place. And so when you're married to your place, what does that mean? And how do you keep that connection alive? Because what we know in the science is that when humans are in the environment where they know they belong, they thrive. They do better at work, they're better parents, they're better partners, they're better everything. And so, okay, you found that place. So how do you keep that relationship alive? What do you do when you have a bad day in your place, which you will undoubtedly have? So we talk about how you're going to have a bad day in your place where you think, this sucks. I hate it here. I don't like you. I don't want to be around you. Well, sure. We do that in marriages all the time. The point is not to have a perfect relationship. The goal is to have a resilient one. So you can come back from that moment and still feel that connection yet again. I talk about divorcing the place, and sometimes places you have to go. And sometimes you want to, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's a divorce that's not your idea. That happens in real life too. So how do you prepare yourself and others in your family maybe to get ready for what can be a very traumatizing thing, which is moving, for goodness sake, and then starting over? How do you not jump right back in, like a lot of divorced people do, and overcommit too early to the next place? How do you take your time? And then finally, I have a chapter on mayor as mother-in-law, which is really my call out to many of my clients who are mayors and community leaders, and saying, you know what, your job, just like a good mother-in-law does, is to help facilitate this match between your resident and your place. And we all know what a bad mother-in-law does, and we've seen lots of public leaders do that. Be over-involved, be judgy, not ask opinions, think they know everything, make you feel like you just wish they were out of the way. And that's unfortunate. They should find a way to be a part of facilitating that partner marriage between the person and the place.
I feel like every politician should actually read that book then, because it seems like all of them are the bad mother-in-law.
Yeah. Yeah, and a few have, and when I talk, when I do talks, they're always in the audience, and I never back down from not talking about that part, because it is important. It's to see yourself as a facilitator between, a person in their place. And sometimes that means you lead. Sometimes that means you keep your mouth shut. Sometimes that means you make it happen. And sometimes it means, you get out of the way. And that's what a good mother-in-law does. And then, frankly, in my experience, that's what a good mayor does too.
So we only have a couple minutes left, and it's really important that we let people know. You mentioned that you're doing a lot of work with the real estate community. You're doing keynotes, articles, etc. If people want to learn more about you, or they want to bring you to their town or to their office, how do they get in touch with you?
I think there are two great ways to get in touch with me. One is through my professional Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Dr.Katherine Loflin. Or you can also message me through my website, and my website is city-doctor.com.
Okay, city-doctor.com. Thank you so much. Our guest today was Dr. Katherine Loflin. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Katherine.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
you so much for having me.
You're welcome. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with more Get Real after this.